purge of Beijing's top generals may be impacting China's military readiness. And Iranian Americans in Los Angeles are reacting after a rally supporting change in Iran. Some say recent developments give them hope for the country's future. Christina Corona reports next. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Chinese military has stopped breaching Taiwan's airspace following the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran that began nearly a week ago. China has been a main supporter of the Iranian regime for decades, but a weakened Iran puts the Chinese regime in a difficult spot. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
The Chinese military is no longer breaching Taiwan's airspace, at least for the past week, as China's closest ally in the Middle East suffered from major U.S. and Israeli strikes, taking out its top leaders. This is unprecedented, as China's military flight breaches on Taiwan were happening daily in what were seen as intimidation tactics or possibly rehearsals of an invasion.
China's increasingly aggressive actions near Taiwan are not just exercises, they are rehearsals.
The U.S. has been arming Taiwan in the event of an attack from China, but China has been benefiting off of the U.S. sending its weapons to Ukraine and dealing with conflicts in the Middle East.
Iran is very, very important when you're planning to invade Taiwan.
The Chinese Communist Party has been building relations with the Iranian regime for decades, building a second front against the U.S. and buying cheap sanctioned oil in the process.
Iran is absolutely key when it comes to sanctions evasion.
All while depleting U.S. resources. One example is when Iranian-backed Houthi terrorists began attacking European cargo ships in late 2023. Container traffic in the Red Sea fell by 90% in 3 months, forcing the U.S. military to intervene.
You want to make sure that you're able to distract the United States.
But now, China's military drawdown on Taiwan may be connected to the CCP's ongoing military purge. The Chinese regime has removed dozens of top generals over the past few months, placing them under investigation, accusing them of disloyalty to the Communist Party. Many say this has undermined the CCP's overall military readiness to invade Taiwan.
The People's Liberation Army is in no position to fight a war. We spend our time in Britain and obviously in the US talking about the threat from China, but maybe it's overblown, Michael.
But the US may need a solution to Iran quickly, as a prolonged conflict could embolden the CCP.
If it looks like the Americans and the free world have gotten stuck in Iran and that the regime still is in place, at that point, I think you could find the Chinese saying Taiwan as a very juicy target. And maybe that the time is right, particularly if President Trump, is handcuffed by domestic political problems.
The outcome of the Iran conflict could determine whether the U.S. can pull through in what may become the face-off of the century, a Chinese move against Taiwan. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Members of the Iranian American is impacting China. Advisor at State Farmer and former CIA operative J. Michael Waller, senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy. Jackie, starting with you, we've not seen that much come out of China in response to this war, aside from words of moral backing and sending a delegation to mediate, some suggesting the regime is scrambling in response. Your thoughts on that, and also how the war is impacting China and its interest in the region?
Well, great to be with you, Tiff. Nice to see you, Michael. I think the Chinese are trying to gather their thoughts about this latest show of force and initiative from the U.S. military and its allies. In terms of their rhetoric or narrative, they're trying to cast the United States as disruptive or unreliable, but I think the facts belie that. I think the show of force from this administration has demonstrated that actually the United States and its allies are back doing their traditional work of enforcing international law. We saw this with the seizure of shadow fleet or sanctioned oil tankers in international waters from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean after the Maduro raid, and now with the Iran war.
And Michael, on that note, multiple reports taking note of Chinese propaganda on overdrive since the war started, even bleeding over into protests on the streets here in America. Why is China trying to control the information space? What's at stake for the CCP here?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party must control the information flow if it's to survive its system of lies. So it has to dominate their narrative and control it. That Xi Jinping is nothing but a complete success back home and back within the party, where he gets credit for everything that goes right, but not that goes wrong. And right now things are going very wrong. In terms of in the United States, well, one of the best ways to undermine a country's efforts is to take advantage of and exploit and foment dissent and decisions and divisiveness within that country. And you see it occurring naturally in our society, but it's exploited by the CCP, which recycles mainstream politicians' criticisms and also funds through various covert means some of the street protests that we've been seeing.
And Jackie, in terms of economic impacts, reports say that China gets about half of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz and buying nearly all of Iran's sanctioned oil. Now, we've seen China halt diesel and gas exports, and it just issued its lowest annual growth target. How could this conflict further deepen China's economic woes?
That's a great question. I think we've seen them exercise caution. You know, they've, as you said, started to kind of husband their energy resources. They are, I think, dealing with the reality that they could be confronted with a prolonged situation where their access is not guaranteed to the energy from Venezuela or from Iran and the rest of the Gulf region that they had been accustomed to receiving. We heard reports last night that there's been a dramatic downturn in PLA operations, so Chinese military operations to put pressure on Taiwan. If that is part of the response or the outcome of Epic Fury, that's a welcome response for the United States and the peace-loving world.
And Michael, expanding on the Latin America component here, this Iran war comes, of course, on the heels of the Venezuela operation, and President Trump talked today talking about Iran and Cuba. Let's actually listen to that part now.
We also urge Iranian diplomats around the world to request asylum and to help us shape a new and better Iran with great potential. It's a country with great potential, a much better future for Iran. It's now beginning. It's going to be, I think, a great future. And people, I want to thank all of the people that have been involved. Marco, you've been doing a fantastic job. And you've been doing a fantastic job on a place called Cuba. What's happening with Cuba is amazing. And we think that we want to finish this one first, but that will be just a question of time.
And Michael, what do you think the administration has in store for Cuba, and what could that mean for China?
Well, as the president said, it's just a question of time. The regime is really on its last legs. It's got a 20-hour-a-day blackout. Trump cut off all the Venezuelan oil lifeline to Cuba, but he also got Mexico to cut off its lifeline of oil to the Cuban regime, so that they've got no foreign sponsors anymore. The Chinese communists can do nothing to protect Cuba, like they could do nothing to protect Maduro in Venezuela, or nothing to protect the Islamic Republic in Iran. So this is a real punch in the face to Xi Jinping and to CCP diplomacy, because it just shows if you're an ally of China, the Chinese regime is not going to come and help you. And the material it sends you for your own self-defense is worthless against American armaments.
And Jackie, President Trump will also be hosting the Shield of the Americas Summit this Saturday. Leaders from El Salvador, Argentina, Chile, and others are expected to attend. Your thoughts on whether this will push back or curb China's influence here?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think the president has already made great progress, as Michael is alluding, in operations so far to kind of take back our hemisphere and arrest the Chinese Communist Party's progress in trying to kind of block us in or corner us in our own backyard. We've seen, major blows to the CCP's alliance network in our hemisphere, and we're also starting to see physical infrastructure changes. So the recovery of ports in Panama, that are important for the security of the canal and the ability of the U.S. to use the canal. If in emergency we had to send American forces from the East Coast to the West Coast, or vice versa. We're starting to see pushback against the PRC's Belt and Road Initiative and other infrastructure and diplomatic and information technology, bio and space cooperation, again, in our backyard. All of those deals that our neighbors had signed with the Chinese Communist Party regime ultimately will be at the expense of our neighbors. And the United States, like State Farm, is a good neighbor. We're there to remind the countries in our hemisphere that if you work with the United States, you get the rule of law, you get property rights respected, you get a full package. When you work with the CCP, you get spyware in your infrastructure, you get threats of kill switches and backdoors, you get coercion, you get threats to cut off important trade if you displease the CCP. And really, that's not a deal that these countries want.
And Michael, looking ahead, how does the Iran war impact President Trump's planned trip to China in April?
It gives him a lot more leverage than he had 1 week ago. Xi Jinping is going to have to cut some sort of deal that he won't want to do. Trump will have the initiative, he'll have the narrative. He controls so much of their oil imports. He controls whether or not their vessels shipping oil to China going through the Strait of Hormuz are going to receive insurance or U.S. naval protection. So she is going to have to really lose a lot of face on this and accept it, and nothing greater could be done for the leader of the Communist Party than to see him lose face before the whole world in front of Donald Trump.
Jackie Dale, Michael Waller, thank you both so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
美国以色列呢联手打击伊朗政权啊，前白宫发言人史派瑟指出呢，美国的用意深远，这给中共造成了巨大的打击。那么要请教政治大学国际关系研究中心的资深研究员宋国成教授啊，请教您觉得说，川普政府这样的作为呢，对于即将来到的川协会不会增添哪一些有利的筹码？
我简单的归结，至少有5大有利的筹码。第一个呢，向习近平展示美国以实力保和平的这样一个坚定的理念啊。所以你这个中共啊，不要在印太地区破坏和平，因为我要保和平，我用实力保和平，所以你中共如果要破坏和平的话，那你就要面对美国对你的实力主义的一个对策啊。第二个的话，我觉得像习近平展示美国强大的军事实力，特别是美中之间的军事科技出现了一整代的这种差距，我们称之为代差。所以你解放军呢，你就不要在这个台海、印太地区等等，请你不要轻举妄动啊，这是第二个有利的筹码。第三个呢，清楚地告诉习近平，你的这一些小兄弟们呢，都已经被我一一清除了哈，所以你的这个所谓的全球反美代理战略啊，扶植这一些小兄弟作为一个你来反对美国的这个代理政权这一套策略应该要怎么样提早这个下班收工了。第四个呢有利的筹码就是我希望明白的告诉就是川普告诉明白的告诉习近平，至少在我的任内你不可以发动任何的战争。那么我觉得第五个也可能是最核心的一个有利的筹码，就是通过这一次史诗愤怒这个行动，而且在很短的时间当中里面以及接下来要大规模的这个消灭伊朗政权的这样的一个事实来展现未来即便是美中在经济议题还有贸易问题上关税问题上可以说是垫高了美国的谈判的筹码。所以中共不要误判这个美国的最高法院虽然做出了川普这个引用法院的错误而宣告他的对等关税是无效的，我已经讲过有好多的这个法律都可以被川普拿来重振他的关税这个政策所以以上1、2、3、4、5个这个有利的一个筹码，其实都是针对这么多年来中共在国际政治上的独裁者误判所导致的结果。 今天无论你独裁者能不能清醒或者你继续的酣睡，总而言之在这次川西会当中，我相信川普会告诉习近平，请你好自为之。
好的，感谢。